Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film When Marnie Was There. Now, this is the last Studio Ghibli film that has been produced so far, and since the studio is restructuring, and this is the last film on their docket, there probably will be other Studio Ghibli films after this, but it looks like it's probably going to be a while, which is a little sad, but what we got is a very Studio Ghibli film. It's directed by Hiromasa Yongbashi, and he also directed The Secret World of Arrietty, and he is probably one of my favorites of the later directors to come out of Studio Ghibli. There was a feeling they didn't have a director to really take over the studio and continue to make financial hits. I kind of disagree when it comes to this guy, who I think is a really great animation director. He's very much a student of Studio Ghibli. His first film very much felt like a Miyazaki film, and this film, When Marnie Was There, feels like a marriage between the slice of life films that we know from Isao Takahata and still has the majesty and the wonder of Hayao Miyazaki. It's a little more Takahata than Miyazaki. It's almost like Takahata's take on a Miyazaki film. Hiromasa Yoshibashi worked on both of those directors' films, so he could probably be very influenced and probably learned a lot from both of those men. He worked on more Miyazaki than Takahata, so it's a little surprising how slice of life this film is. But it kind of represents more of the slice of life films that you expect from Studio Ghibli. I think everyone thinks of it like there's the fantastical ones and there's the slice of life ones, but this is like an interesting, nice marriage of the two, just more on the side of the slice of life than you'd probably expect from Studio Ghibli at this time, with such a wonderful female protagonist, wonderful, well-told, kind of small stakes, no conflict film that we're used to from Ghibli. Anna, who is living in the city with her foster parents and keeps having asthma attacks and feels particularly unwanted and unloved, even though her foster parents are very loving and nurturing and do take very good care of her. She is a teenage girl, and I think, as most teenagers can attest, has emotions that don't necessarily feel warranted in her home life, but is still majorly depressed. And she's sent off to live on the countryside with friends of her foster parents. Hopefully the sea air will help calm down her asthma, the cleaner sea air of the country, in the seaside town where she has gone to live with this nice older couple who take care of her as she draws and just kind of hangs out around town. But then she becomes kind of obsessed with this marsh house that she keeps having dreams about. This one girl, Marnie, who she thinks lives there. She's not sure if it's a ghost or what it is, but she keeps going back to the marsh house, eventually seeing Marnie and hanging out with her, and it becomes her whole reason for being there is going to hang out with this girl Marnie, who appears not to be there at all during the daytime and during most of the time, but then will pop up out of nowhere to hang out with her and then take her to parties at the marsh house, which she keeps drawing and being obsessed about, as she keeps hanging out with Marnie and just having a good time, not thinking about the troubles she used to have in the city. One of the great things about When Marnie Was There is the animation and the color is so lush and expressive and so pronounced. It's a really beautiful animated film. We don't really get so many beautiful 2D animated films like this. You have all the artists and the team that Ghibli has, and you can see how well trained they are technically. It's just a really beautiful film. The animation is just so immaculate and almost perfect. It's like watching what's called the classic first 5 Disney features. It's like that level of expertise, something that you wish would still happen nowadays, and watching When Marnie Was There reminds me how just technically gifted Studio Ghibli is, and this highlights that so well. Takahata certainly pushed the envelope with Princess Kaguya, and The Wind Rises did as well, but this feels like them kind of doing a smaller story in scope and ambition. It just makes you fall in love with the studio all over again, and if you really want to read into the fact that this could be the last one, how good the animation is makes you feel that way, because it makes you feel like everybody kind of upped their game so that they could make an amazing film like this if this is the way they're going to go out. You can read into that regardless of if there are 20 movies after this or there are no movies after this. The animation in this film is just amazingly beautiful. The character of Anna feels like a real Studio Ghibli female protagonist in that she comes into the situation and kind of grows up and matures throughout it. And it's not the kind of progression where it feels like the film's like patting you on the back or something. It feels like natural, and especially how angry she is and how she blows up at this one girl at one point reminded me of being a teenager and just doing stupid things and not really understanding your emotions and having hormones and going through puberty and not really getting that, not having control over that. And I've noticed in some reviews people don't exactly understand, like she just feels like random, but that's like kind of what being a teenager is. You don't really understand your emotions. There's no real reason for her to be in this depression. Her reasons for being in this depression are a little weird, but that's kind of what it's like being a teenager. You'll take something very personally. You'll suddenly snap at someone. You'll suddenly do something just bizarre and strange, and you'll feel very isolating. I feel like I was kind of like Anna a lot. When I was watching this film, I really related to that. That was kind of more of the teen I was. It feels like Kiki in that respect also feels kind of like an Only Yesterday type of movie, almost like Spirited Away, but I think Kiki or Only Yesterday are films that are easier to compare because Only Yesterday, where she goes off to kind of find herself and get away from the city, this film feels a lot more like that, but with a lot more of a fantastical element to it. The whole idea of just getting wrapped up in something and kind of forgetting about all your troubles works really well in this film because it works organically. Because when you get wrapped up in something to forget about your troubles, you don't think about your troubles. So this film doesn't think about that. You just kind of like are so into it, and then like a month later, like, oh shit, that's gone. I didn't even, oh, okay, whatever. And they don't have that moment in this film because you don't need to have it because that's not natural. That's something I like about Studio Ghibli films. It lets these characters be human in a way that other narratives feel like they need to explain it to you. And if you feel like you need that explained to you, you're a dumber viewer than you realize, because this film, for the most of its runtime, I think really rewards a really smart viewing audience, and it gives the audience credit, which is something I always loved about Studio Ghibli. I loved Arrietty. I really think he is kind of the future of Studio Ghibli. He is a great director in that he really feels like he's from that style. He almost feels like a studio director for Studio Ghibli, which is a weird thing to say because it's such an individual studio, but he does feel like he's a studio director for Studio Ghibli. I've really liked both of his films. I think I like him as much as Yoshifumi Kandu, who directed Whisper of the Heart and unfortunately died a couple years after, and everyone thought he was going to be the new hot Studio Ghibli director, and he never got to be. And I feel like Hiromasa Yoshibashi, he is what the studio needs. He fits the sensibilities really well, but he feels unique in his own way. The way he mixes the two styles of the two masters of Studio Ghibli. And this feels so much more like a Takahata film, but like Takahata when he was doing like Only Yesterday before he got all weird and stuff, like kind of a more constrained Takahata. And I kind of like that about it. It has a nice flow to it. It has a natural flow to it. It gets you invested into it as Anna gets more and more obsessed with Marnie and she keeps seeing her in the Marsh house. I get more invested into the film. I get more interested into this movie, and it's a really rich film going experience that way. Now, it's hard to talk about this film without going into spoilers. So I am going to do a spoiler section, but I'm going to say a couple of things before I finish off for all you who have not seen it, and may I specify that do not watch past the spoiler section because it will absolutely ruin the movie and you'll be ruining a really great movie for yourself because it's really just inviting and investing. Kind of reminds me of Random Harvest in a lot of ways. It's fun to go through a great mystery, but what Studio Ghibli, what they've done and what Hiromasa Yoshibashi has done in this film, showing a girl growing up through a friendship and through a mystery. But like a lot of Studio Ghibli films, I think it really captures when you're a kid and you get really invested into something and you get really interested in something and how that kind of passes the time and really becomes your whole world, which kind of reminds me also of Whisper of the Heart. But it's a very engaging, amazing movie, and if you can see it, I really recommend you do. This is the spoiler section of the review. I highly recommend you do not go past this section if you have not seen the film because it really just ruins the whole movie. But I would like to talk about it anyway, so do not go any further if you've not seen this film. I guess the big spoiler is who Marnie is and what her relationship is with Anna. And I think early in the film, they kind of hint at kind of a lesbian type of thing a little bit. I think it's genuinely there, especially the fact that when you later learn about the diary that she is replacing what will eventually be Marnie's husband, and a lot of these kind of love interest relationships. I'm not exactly sure what that was doing in there when you come to understand that Marnie is her grandmother, and that when she talks about how her parents were killed in the car crash, that was Marnie's daughter, and that Marnie took care of her for about a year or so before she died. I even noticed later when you see the flashbacks of Anna that she's holding a doll that looks remarkably like Marnie. I don't know, but that's definitely in there. It's interesting because what it says about her past and growing up and kind of confronting and having her deal with herself, and a lot of that has to do with your past and where you came from and who you are, and I think that's a lot of what When Marnie Was There is really about, so it kind of works thematically. It is kind of a shock, but the thing I don't like about the reveal is towards the end when they start to explain it and the woman who's drawing explains it, and then they like, just so we're clear, this is totally Marnie's her grandmother and stuff. I was a little like, guys, don't oversell it. It felt like the end of The Sixth Sense, or that whole period in the late 90s where they'd over-explain an ending to you and they'd like show all the clips of where it happened and stuff. It really felt like that, but I like the kind of mystery of it when it was like, I'm pretty sure it is. There's no way it's not. And then they're like, just to be clear, it is. I was like, really? It almost took me out of the movie. I really loved the movie until that point. I think that's kind of the film's fatal flaw, is over-explaining something. And that's something, it almost felt like the faith in the audience that Studio Ghibli has, and normally these films have, was kind of taken away from When Marnie Was There by doing that. That was a motivation I really, really didn't like. And I wish they hadn't done in this film. It like really felt inappropriate. But I like what they're doing, like her friend was her grandmother, and that maybe it wasn't a ghost, maybe it wasn't supernatural. They never really answer you on that front, and I like that. It kind of felt like that was maybe Anna was being confronted, like she was having kind of like older memories come back to her now that she had the time to really think about them, and she was kind of being enveloped in them, is kind of my own strange little theory. But I don't even want that to be true. I don't want to know what the answer is. I like the kind of imagination mystery. I kind of thought that was maybe what was going on, and as the narrative kept progressing, it kind of felt like maybe there was something about that. But for most of the film, it felt like it was like a ghost and it was magical, but I don't exactly know what it was. I kind of like the full circleness to it. I just don't like the reveal at the end. It kind of added to a real memorable experience that you don't spoil it for someone, because then the movie's like completely ruined, and it kind of gives it a mysterious nature to it. And a lot of people talk about how twists don't really work for movies and how a film should be more than a twist. But I think Studio Ghibli's the kind of the studio, and this director of this film I think is strong enough that it actually works narratively. It is more than this reveal at the end, more than this spoiler, and more than this twist. But the twist kind of adds to it narratively in a way that I don't think you could really have the film have the impact without it. I liked when the woman who's painting the Marsh house, when she was telling that story, how it was all told visually as she was telling it, and Anna was there, almost kind of clarifying that this was all in Anna's imagination. And you don't really know much about her actual mother. It's just like Marnie was her mother in a lot of ways, just like how her foster mother was like her mother. Her real mother doesn't even come into it, which is an interesting way to do it. I think most people would focus more on her biological mother rather than her grandmother and the foster mother. It's going on the most natural thing for Anna, and that's who the film's really about and focuses on. I talk a lot about how there's certain films that are the right film for the character, and this film really feels that way. It also like respects her so much. When that reveal comes around, it also shows how she's matured through learning all of this. You could say in a lot of ways it feels like a kind of genre Ghibli film, but I think it's a very good one even at that. That doesn't really bother me. It's a genre that I think is very rich and great and nuanced storytelling, and I think that it shows like what kind of filmmakers and storytellers have been coming out of this studio. And it's a sad thing to see the studio go, and to see a film that can handle something as great as a twist like that, and whichever way it goes after this. I think it was amazing to watch such a rewarding and strong character piece from such a rewarding and strong animation studio. So if you have seen When Marnie Was There and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And I actually did do a Studio Ghibli review series where I reviewed all of the films of Studio Ghibli and the previous films of Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki, and you can check out that review series on the annotation below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.